There are duos you never see coming, unlikely partnerships that, once formed, prove formidable in more ways than one. Rimuru and Myourmile belong to that very specific category, the kind of individuals you'd be better off never facing in a negotiation, and even less as opponents in an economic war. Two minds built for business, brought together by fate and by a shared taste for bold schemes that make reasonable people raise an eyebrow. Myourmile, whose full name is Guard Myourmile, was no ordinary man even before crossing paths with Demon Lord Rimuru. Dressed in his merchant attire, wearing his neatly groomed mustache and his ever-calculating smile, he had built his commercial empire from the Kingdom of Blumend, that small yet pragmatic nation, wise enough to establish diplomatic relations with the monster nation long before the rest of the world even considered it. This strategic positioning allowed Blumend to gain access to goods of exceptional quality, starting with the high potions produced by Tempest, whose reputation was already well established across the entire continent. It was precisely with the intention of purchasing them in large quantities that Myourmile personally traveled to the monster nation before setting out toward the kingdom of Ingratia to sell them there. However, the journey would take a very different turn from what he had anticipated. A sky dragon, a rare subspecies of archdragons that failed to evolve into wind dragons and underwent a mutation, attacked his convoy, spreading chaos in its wake. What Myourmile did not yet know at that exact moment was that Rimuru had already heard about this merchant who was buying Tempest's potions in such massive quantities. The rescue that followed was therefore not entirely a coincidence. Rather, the circumstances simply accelerated a meeting that was bound to happen sooner or later. From that point on, the two men began weaving their plans together. Myourmile became involved in several large-scale projects led by Rimuru, notably the establishment of certain rather unconventional businesses, as well as the design and organization of Tempest's founding festival, the grand event meant to introduce the monster nation to the entire world. These collaborations gradually transformed the relationship between the two men, to the point that Myourmile eventually left Blumend to settle permanently in Tempest, a decision heavy with meaning for a man of his standing, but one that clearly showed how much he believed in Rimuru's vision. He was no longer just a passing business partner, he had become a true companion of ambition, an ally who shared the same vision of a world where commerce and prosperity would be the driving forces of change. For Rimuru in particular, Myourmile represented one of the very few individuals truly capable of understanding his passion for business, his love for entrepreneurship, and his desire to build something that goes far beyond the simple framework of a nation of monsters. He was also an essential asset when it came to generating funds that Rimuru could use freely without having to answer to anyone. Within the Jura-Tempest Federation, his role was clear and his scope of influence considerable. Head of financial operations and of the communications and advertising department, he managed both the nation's economic flow and its image toward the outside world. And his personality, direct, impulsive, and willing to take risks where others would hesitate, earned him excellent relationships with Tempest's top executives who might otherwise have been wary of a human in such a high position. Where things become particularly interesting is when we observe Myourmile in a slightly different context. Because from the very first episode of Season 4, attentive observers noticed something unusual in his tone, a slight nervousness, a warmth that contrasted with the calculated composure he usually displays. The reason for this change? Myourmiles is an absolute fan of hero Masayuki, this man who weighs his words as carefully as he weighs gold, who negotiates without flinching even against the greatest powers, clearly loses part of his usual composure when he finds himself in the same room as the legendary hero whose exploits he had followed in the arenas of Ingratia. The mask of the unshakable merchant cracks, revealing an awestruck fan struggling to contain his excitement. In a way, it's touching. He who crossed paths with Demon Lord Rimuru during the attack of the Sky Dragon and retained a sense of admiration mixed with awe now holds the same fascination for Masayuki. Two exceptional figures for one man, and in both cases, an inexplicable kind of magic seems to be at work. Now, let's go back to what fundamentally connects these two unusual partners. The first common point, and undoubtedly the most obvious, is their love for business and money. But be careful not to reduce this inclination to simple greed, because for them, wealth is not an end in itself. It is a tool, a lever, a concrete expression of their strategic intelligence, serving much greater ambitions. Money is the fuel of dreams. Rimuru seeks to build a world where humans and monsters coexist in peace and prosperity, while Myourmile has set himself the mission of spreading the best things the world has to offer, all while maintaining a stable and virtuous commercial order. These two visions naturally converge toward the same outcome, the growth and influence of Tempest as an unavoidable commercial power in the world. However, while their goals align, their methods differ significantly. Rimuru is a man of intuition and enthusiasm. He enjoys bringing his ideas to life, seeing things take shape in his hands, or rather, his pseudopods. But administrative and repetitive tasks deeply bore him, and he gladly delegates that tedious work to his subordinates. Myourmile, on the other hand, is a practitioner at heart. He excels in negotiation and information gathering and knows exactly in what order to pull the right levers to turn a bold idea into a concrete and profitable reality. He understands the business world down to its smallest mechanisms and knows how to navigate both its shadows and its bright sides. To illustrate his willingness to get physically involved when necessary, during the demonstrations held in the dungeon, he did not hesitate to subject himself to a staged decapitation in order to prove to the audience the spectacular effects of the resurrection bracelet. A shocking attraction designed to leave a lasting impression and make everyone want to step into the dungeon of the Monster Nation. Every risk was calculated, zero improvisation. In simple terms, Rimuru draws the big picture, sets the horizon. Myourmile builds the road to get there, stone by stone, contract by contract. If they had never met, Tempest's economic development would undoubtedly have taken much longer, and perhaps Rimuru's vision would have remained a dream for a long time, lacking someone capable of executing it at that level. These two were meant to find each other. Admittedly, their collaboration sometimes drifts into excessive escalation and plans that are a bit too ambitious. And Season 4 was quick to give us a particularly telling example of this, with the large-scale advertising strategy deployed around Tempest Dungeon from the very first episode. The dungeon that Tempest opened to the public represented far more than a simple attraction or a training ground for thrill-seeking adventurers. It was a true institution, a new kind of urban entertainment designed to become a lasting part of the Monster Nation's landscape. At the origin of this architectural and magical feat was Ramirez's unique skill, Small World. This extraordinary ability, unique to the Fairy of the Labyrinth, allowed her to construct an entire dimensional structure, 100 carefully designed floors, each representing a distinct dimensional layer where the density of magicules gradually increases as one descends, making the lower levels increasingly difficult to traverse. The construction lasted an entire week, marked by save points installed every 10 floors, before Rimuru, Ramirez, and Veldora themselves added obstacles and traps. Milam even lent a hand for terrain effects and the capture of elemental dragons. Unveiled with great fanfare during Tempest's founding festival, this labyrinth instantly became the iconic jewel of the Monster Nation. A unique place where difficulty could be adjusted at will, where traps and pathways could be reconfigured instantly, and where Ramirez exercised near absolute authority over space and matter. Ramirez also designed special equipment for adventurers, the Resurrection Bracelet, which nullifies death inside the dungeon and returns the user to the entrance with all injuries healed, at the cost of their loot, of course, as well as the return whistle for emergency retreats. However, despite such careful design, the reality on the ground after 3 days of operation was disappointing. Adventurers had barely made any progress in descending the labyrinth. Rimuru and his allies therefore gathered in an emergency meeting to consider solutions. It was Masayuki who proposed adjustments inspired by video games, the addition of a tutorial to guide beginners, the implementation of clearly marked save points, and item recovery systems to make the experience more accessible and appealing. On his side, Myourmile provided a cold and clear commercial analysis. Word of mouth was, for the moment, only reaching low-ranking adventurers, which severely limited the dungeon's reputation. They needed to aim higher, to reach a different category of clientele. It is worth noting Myourmile maintained excellent relations with Soka, who had co-hosted the founding festival alongside him, and that her subordinates were working under his direction to collect reliable data on attendance and visitor feedback. This informal network was a valuable asset for refining the strategy in real time. At the same time, contacts had been established through hero Masayuki to spread advertisements across the various regional branches of the Adventurers Guild, in order to reach a broader and more targeted audience. But Myourmile didn't stop there. His next proposal was a breathtaking display of commercial boldness to implement a system of massive rewards, specifically targeting nobles and the wealthy elite. The concept was simple and incredibly effective. A reward granted to anyone who managed to conquer the final floor of the dungeon, set at the astronomical sum of 100 gold coins, an amount equivalent to roughly 1 billion Japanese yen. And to maintain excitement throughout the entire journey, an additional reward would be offered to every adventurer who defeated one of the bosses guarding each 10-floor milestone. The objective was clear: to ignite the pride and competitiveness of the nobles, to turn the assault on the dungeon into a quest for prestige as much as profit, and to transform it into a full-fledged industry capable of generating considerable economic flow. Of course, in reality, reaching the final level to face the ultimate boss, Veldora, let alone defeating him, was absolutely impossible, and the bosses scattered across the intermediate floors were no less formidable. Yet, in the first weeks following the opening, a few particularly determined and talented adventurers managed to progress at a surprisingly fast pace through the upper floors. However, over time, the dungeon began to turn into something Rimuru himself had not entirely anticipated. Without its master's knowledge, a true internal organization started to emerge among the labyrinth's creatures, a hierarchy of elite guardians that would eventually come to be known as the 10 Great Wonders of the Dungeon. At their head, beings of terrifying power took position on the deepest floors. Adelman, Lord of Gehenna, stood watch over the 70th floor and its depths, within that vast and grim space known as Deathtopia, the Kingdom of the Dead. Even deeper, on the 80th floor, Zegion established himself as a guardian, this insect with a black demonic steel exoskeleton modified by Raphael himself, whose combat power rivaled that of the most formidable beings in all of Tempest. With guardians of that caliber stationed at such advanced levels, it was only natural that traffic in the deeper floors dropped drastically. No sane adventurer wanted to venture into that corridor of death. But contrary to what one might expect, the overall attendance of the dungeon did not decline, because even the early floors offered rewards attractive enough to justify the effort. The magic crystals and rare equipment obtained from the labyrinth's monsters represented valuable loot, capable of transforming the fortune of an ordinary adventurer. Those who had experienced this opportunity found themselves irresistibly drawn back to it. This is precisely what Volume 13.5 of the light novel illustrates in a very concrete way through the story of the team, Desert Wind. A group of adventurers who had found their economic balance by repeatedly clearing the 4th and 5th floors of the dungeon, generating enough income to afford an entire month's stay in Tempest. A stable and profitable lifestyle, achievable without having to descend into the depths of the labyrinth, and the money earned through hard exploration had a hard time staying in their pockets. Because Tempest, a vibrant and commercial city, was full of irresistible temptations, splendid clothing and fashion shops, a cuisine that existed nowhere else in the world, shows and battles in the arena. As strange as it may seem, the dungeon and the city formed a perfectly coherent economic ecosystem. Adventurers spent in the city what they earned in the labyrinth, thus fueling Tempest's economic engine in a steady and almost involuntary way. These noble financial sacrifices therefore served a purpose. One of the moments where Myourmile would be called upon in a particularly intense way is closely tied to the birth of what could be called Tempest's culinary route. In this world where gastronomy is a luxury inaccessible to the vast majority of the population, sophisticated culinary recipes simply do not exist naturally. And ramen, this iconic dish born from the meeting between Chinese cuisine and Japanese culinary ingenuity, a symbol of a popular food culture that had reached its peak in Rimuru's former world, was of course completely unknown in this parallel universe. And yet it was in this very world that it would be born, thanks to the perseverance and ingenuity of Rimuru and those around him. The spark behind this culinary adventure is a delicious irony. During a meeting concerning how to deal with the Kingdom of Farmus, Shion accidentally said the word ramen while trying to name raisin, a slip of the tongue that immediately brought back to Rimuru the vivid memory of this dish from his past life. The idea took root in his mind with the force of an obsession, and the challenge of recreating this meal in a world that had never even heard of it was set in motion. But the obstacles were numerous. It was necessary to identify, within this world, the closest possible ingredients to those that make up real ramen, which meant searching through markets and reserves across the entire known continent. That is where Myourmiles stepped in, mobilizing his vast commercial network to source the appropriate raw materials as close as possible to the original ingredients. Rimuru, for his part, could mentally reconstruct the recipe within his stomach and validate its proportions and flavors, but that ability alone was not enough to open a restaurant. A real cook was needed, capable of reproducing the dish for a real and demanding clientele. The choice then fell on Gobuichi, the hobgoblin trained under Shuna's tutelage, who had become Tempest's best cook after his master. Rimuru himself acknowledges that entrusting this task to Shuna would have been simpler and more efficient, but had deliberately chose to spare her, while giving Gobuichi the opportunity to benefit from this project. A team was then formed, with Gobuichi at its head as the culinary project leader. After transmitting to him, from the memories of his past life, the very essence of ramen, Rimuru gave him complete freedom to carry the initiative forward. However, contrary to what his own account might suggest, the process was far from simple. In the manga, the difficulties are very real. The strong smell of tonkatsu broth disturbs the locals, and when Gobuichi tries to fix this by purifying the bones, the result loses flavor and becomes bland. Finding the right balance becomes a real challenge. On top of that comes a major constraint: the diversity of the dungeon and Tempest's clientele. Each race has its own preferences, as shown by the incident involving a fishman shocked by a seafood ramen where he feels as though he is consuming his own kind. Far from being discouraged, Gobuichi uses every piece of feedback to improve, adjusting noodles to match the broths and even offering variations to suit different sensitivities. What seemed like a quick success is in reality a long struggle made of trials, errors, and constant adjustments. But his efforts eventually pay off, his skills improve, and he is rewarded with new utensils, a symbol of his success. In the end, Tempest offers a complete menu: soy sauce, miso, tonkotsu, chicken broth, and seafood variations. A success so great that even Hinata Sakaguchi loses her composure at the first bite, followed by Holy Knights who are equally won over. With Myourmile handling the strategy, expansion begins, restaurants multiply, and profits flow directly into Rimuru-esque coffers. But for the Demon Lord of Tempest, this is only the beginning. And as good food inevitably attracts skilled individuals, other cooks and culinary artisans begin to flock in, bringing their own specialties and enriching the gastronomic offerings of this commercial axis. One can easily imagine Rimuru and Myourmile, their eyes shining as they look upon the spectacle of that golden prosperity they had helped build together. Meanwhile, Rimuru had made a crucial discovery regarding a particular property of Ramirez's intrinsic skill, Small World. Beyond its primary function of creating and managing the labyrinth, this extraordinary ability was actually capable of projecting all internal information of the dungeon in the form of highly precise, three-dimensional images. Everything happening on each floor, battles, explorations, triggered traps, defeats, and victories, could be captured and displayed in real time as detailed visual sequences. Ramirez herself had long ignored and discarded this data due to its sheer volume, far beyond what she could process alone. It was by granting Rimuru access to her small world skill that this vast source of information became usable, and it was Raphael who fully transformed the potential of these images into a concrete reality by analyzing them, evaluating them, and making them perfectly accessible. Rimuru could now closely monitor everything taking place in the depths of his labyrinth, a strategic surveillance capability of invaluable worth for the management and evolution of the dungeon. But Raphael did not stop there. With the creative genius that defines this entity of seemingly limitless resources, the ultimate skill took on an entirely different role, that of a content editor. By selecting the most spectacular moments captured within the labyrinth's floors, assembling the most impressive battle sequences, and the most striking moments of bravery, Raphael created true audiovisual works from the raw material produced by the dungeon. A new form of entertainment had just been born in this world, and it would achieve tremendous success. Adventurers whose exploits were broadcast to the public saw their popularity skyrocket, their reputation cross borders, and some even experienced unexpected changes in their romantic lives due to this sudden media exposure. The massive screen displayed during the founding festival had already demonstrated the power of images over crowds in this world. But this phenomenon went much further. It established an entirely new culture where individual performances could influence social status, personal relationships, and the entire course of one's life. Without this image-based revolution, the feats of adventurers would have remained confined to word of mouth and the written records of guilds, a slow, limited, and ultimately far less profitable form of dissemination. One of the moments that would leave a lasting impression in this emerging industry was the broadcast of the battle between hero Masayuki and the Tempest Serpent stationed as the guardian of the 40th floor, a monster of A- rank, known for its devastating poison breath, capable of wiping out a group of careless adventurers in an instant. The footage of this confrontation, projected through magical display equipment, caused a sensation and greatly contributed to amplifying the already considerable reputation of the dungeon. Masayuki himself signed an exclusive contract, with earnings worthy of his legendary status. Rimuru and Myourmiles had every reason to be pleased. As usual, Rimuru delegated all the tedious yet essential procedures to Myourmiles: broadcasting rights, image rights, contractual negotiations with the adventurers whose feats were selected for distribution, all of the legal and commercial machinery that Rimuru neither had the interest nor the patience to handle. Myourmiles, however, did not see it as a burden. He saw it as an opportunity. The image industry had just been born in this world, and this was only the beginning. These same visual projection capabilities derived from Small World were not used solely for entertainment or commercial promotion. They were quickly integrated as strategic tools by the Holy Knights, who used them to analyze their own combat techniques, identify their weaknesses, and refine their engagement tactics. Recorded battle scenes from the dungeon thus became true educational material, and this military use of visual data would later be confirmed on a much larger scale during the war against the Eastern Empire, where real-time battlefield surveillance through this method gave Tempest a considerable tactical advantage over its enemies, an innovation whose impact on the outcome of battles was far from negligible. But let's return to a softer, more refined aspect of the life Rimuru leads. Among his favorite spots in the dwarven kingdom of Dwargen, one held a special place in the demon lord's heart, the Butterflies of the Night, an elegant cabaret establishment run by elves. These hostesses, with their attentive ears and carefully crafted smiles, knew how to provide a refined and intimate atmosphere, far removed from the turmoil of governance and warfare. Rimuru had actually discovered the Butterflies of the Night during his very first visit to Dwargen, long before becoming a demon lord, back when he was still a curious little slime navigating a world unfamiliar to him. A similar establishment also existed in Ingratia, managed by Myourmiles himself, and in a way that was not entirely intentional. Rimuru found himself enjoying it alongside his students during one of his visits to the capital, a situation that turned out to be more amusing than problematic. It was from this constant fascination with such establishments that Rimuru naturally developed the desire to one day open an elf-based venue in Tempest, his own Night Butterfly, under his own banner. The realization of this dream came through a rather sordid affair triggered during the preparations for the founding festival. When Rimuru went to meet Myourmiles to request his collaboration in organizing the festivities, he arrived in the middle of a visit from Viscount Kazak. This questionable individual had the audacity to propose something utterly unacceptable to Myourmiles, acquiring elves as slaves for commercial purposes, a proposition that was not only deeply inhumane and morally repugnant, but also politically explosive. High-ranking elves maintained direct ties with the magic dynasty of Sarion, and any such dealings risked triggering a major international diplomatic incident. Myourmiles, being a shrewd man who had no need for that kind of trouble, initially brushed off the proposal while internally noting that the situation smelled far too dangerous. Then Rimuru made his entrance, and the tone shifted immediately. Kazak, far from being impressed by the presence of the Demon Lord, foolishly made a condescending remark, suggesting that he might be willing to take Rimuru under his wing. This insult, directed at the Demon Lord of Tempest and, in Myourmiles' eyes, both his savior and trusted partner, was the final straw. Myourmiles' anger erupted with absolute firmness. He threw Kazak out on the spot, definitively ending their business relationship. At least, the incident had one benefit. It brought to Rimuru's attention the existence of an entire network involved in elf trafficking. Sui was immediately tasked with conducting a thorough investigation. The inquiry fortunately led to the rescue and protection of all the elves involved. The question then arose, what should be done with these freed elves? How could they be given a dignified, secure life that respected their autonomy? The answer was both practical and perfectly aligned with Myourmiles' ambitions. An establishment reserved for elves was opened on the 95th floor of the dungeon, a refined space carefully designed where elven hostesses welcomed their guests in a luxurious and soothing setting. Access to the establishment was restricted, reserved for premium members, nobles, and influential figures capable of qualifying to enter this privileged circle. It was, to put it plainly, a completely respectable place where all participants were true gentlemen. As the number of adventurers continued to grow over time, a second establishment aimed at a less elite but equally dedicated clientele was later opened alongside it. The 95th floor had, in fact, become an extraordinary place in itself, a haven of luxury and pleasure nestled within the very heart of the labyrinth, accessible only to those who had survived the previous 94 floors with enough resources to enjoy it. And Rimuru, as a true expert in tourism dynamics, had deliberately set the establishment's prices well above the standard rate, because there is a universal law in commerce. Prices rise wherever people are willing to pay more for a unique experience. Adventurers who had risked their lives to accumulate magic crystals and rare equipment did not hesitate to spend generously once they reached this floor. The hard-earned money gathered in the depths of the dungeon was thus effortlessly drained on the 95th floor, and to replenish their funds, they dove back into the labyrinth. A perfect economic cycle, both diabolical and efficient, spinning endlessly like a well-oiled wheel. A golden trap designed and maintained by the duo Rimuru and Myourmiles with a level of skill that can only be described as genius. Among the other personal uses Rimuru made of this establishment, one example stands out in particular. Gobuta, the loyal yet unfortunate goblin soldier, was regularly taken to the Special Members Club as a reward whenever Rimuru wanted to motivate him to put in extra effort, a way of managing his human resources that says a lot about the Demon Lord's pragmatic ingenuity. Warning, the following developments reveal major events from the light novel. If you prefer to discover them on your own, this is the moment to pause the video. The schemes of Rimuru and Myourmiles did not stop at the level of the dungeon or Tempest tourism economy. Their ambition drove them towards something far greater and far darker. For centuries, the Rosso family had exercised absolute and discrete control over the Western nations from its stronghold in the kingdom of Siltrosso. Granbel Rosso, head of the family and central figure among the five elders, was not merely a king among others. He was the hidden architect of the entire underground economy of the Western nations. Through his agents embedded within the various member nations, he controlled the Western Council and maintained complete dominance over organized crime across the region. But this meticulously constructed system, built over decades of manipulation and corruption, began to crack and eventually collapse with the rise of Tempest. The gradual fall of the Rosso family and its five elders left behind a massive vacuum in the control of the Western underworld, a vacuum that could not be left to descend into chaos without consequences. Testarossa, the white primordial serving Rimuru, had indeed been enough at first to bring the situation under control and prevent the unrest from spiraling into open anarchy. But calming things in the short term did not address the core issue. What should be done with all those individuals who had gravitated around the world of organized crime, who had known nothing but that system their entire lives, and who suddenly found themselves without structure, without protection, and without prospects? The case of Glenda, formerly a mercenary in service to the Rosso family, once bound to them by a curse of constraint, freed thanks to Rimuru and later aligned with Tempest, perfectly illustrated the problem. Someone who has been involved in criminal activities carries with them a reputation and potential enemies. If this type of profile multiplied across an entire region, the most fragile nations would quickly be overwhelmed, unable to handle such a mass of desperate individuals in search of structure. The void left by the Rosso family and its five elders risked turning into a social powder keg ready to explode. The response to this colossal challenge took the form of a plan as bold as it was effective. Since a structure was needed to contain and channel all this criminal energy without letting it dissolve into uncontrolled chaos, Rimuru and Myourmiles simply decided to create the largest criminal organization in the West themselves. Not to turn it into a hub of crime, but on the contrary, to use it as a framework that would redirect desperate individuals toward legitimate paths, prevent them from falling into delinquency, and offer the most talented among them a future worthy of their abilities. To rule the darkness in order to control it, that was the philosophy behind the plan. It was during a rather lively drinking night that the genesis of all this took shape. Elmesia Sarion, the empress of the magic dynasty of Sarion, whose influence alone rivaled that of all the Western nations combined, and whose audience usually required years of waiting even for kings, found herself sharing drinks at the same table as Rimuru and Myourmiles. What began as a relatively composed conversation quickly drifted into confidences normally reserved for those in whom one has absolute trust. State secrets blended with grand ambitions. Alcohol loosened both minds and tongues, and the three individuals gathered around that table discovered that they not only shared the same analysis of the state of the world, but also the same taste for radical and creative solutions. The understanding was immediate and complete. The three wise drunks were born. Myourmiles, impressed by Elmesia's sharp analytical mind and blade-like intellect, did not hesitate to address her with surprising familiarity, calling her Big Sister, a sincere and affectionate title he gave her. Had King Gazelle witnessed that scene, he would have instantly lost his legendary composure. What could have remained a simple barroom conversation was propelled at incredible speed by the fact that two of the three participants were top-tier heads of state. The major decisions made that night were translated into concrete actions with astonishing rapidity. In just a few months, all criminal organizations in the West had been unified under a single structure. The secret society Riega was born. Its name formed from the first syllable of each of its three founders in abbreviated form. Ri for Rimuru, E for Elmesia, Ga for guard. Those who did not know the origin of the name assumed it meant three wise drunks, an interpretation that in truth was not entirely wrong. The reality is that its founders were literally drinking when they laid its foundations. Riega welcomed into its ranks the outcasts, unemployed mercenaries, and individuals with compromised reputations who no longer had a place in official society. Glenda Atlee, former commander of the Blood Shadow, freed from the Rosso family's curse and aligned with Tempest, found her place within this structure. Captain Gerard, former leader of a mercenary company, along with his loyal subordinate Ayn, also contributed to it. All of them, without exception, had a role to play in this underground system meticulously orchestrated from above. But the genius of this plan did not stop at the underworld. To prevent a single organization from concentrating too much power and eventually becoming corrupted from within, which is the inevitable fate of any monopoly, Rimuru designed a dual structure for the public and legitimate face of his economic empire. Two major commercial organizations were created to dominate the Western nations' market, and they were deliberately set in competition against each other. The first, the Four Nations Trade Alliance, brought together the Kingdom of Blumend, the Kingdom of Farmenus, the Dwarven Kingdom of Dwargen, and Tempest under the official leadership of Myourmiles as CEO. The second, the Western General Trading, was established behind the scenes by Elmesia and officially placed under the leadership of Figaro Ros Doran, a survivor of the Rosso family, a strategic choice that granted the organization inherited legitimacy and an existing network, while discreetly placing it under the control of the trio. This survivor of the Rosso lineage had clearly understood the situation. Anyone who dared to oppose an alliance between a demon lord destined to dominate the world and a celestial empress whose influence spans an entire continent would find only one outcome at the end of that resistance: disappearance. The pragmatic intelligence inherited from the Rosso family proved its worth. No matter which of the two organizations prevailed commercially, the profits would ultimately flow back to Riega, and at the top of the pyramid, to its three smiling founders, a perfectly compartmentalized system, perfectly sealed, perfectly profitable. The smiles shared by the three accomplices spoke volumes about their satisfaction. Myourmiles, for his part, had accomplished in just a few years a transformation that would have astonished anyone who had known him in his early days as a simple merchant in Blumend. On the surface, he remained that affable, jovial businessman, always smiling beneath his neatly groomed mustache. Beneath that, he had become one of the most powerful and influential individuals on the continent, financial director of Tempest, representative of the Four Nations Trade Alliance, co-founder of Riega, and shadow master of the Western underworld, a dual identity that very few people suspected. Since their very first meeting, Myourmile had sensed something in Rimuru that went beyond the ordinary, a nearly divine figure that his instincts had immediately recognized as exceptional. But reality went far beyond what he had imagined. Rimuru would become a member of the Octagram, the alliance of the 8 greatest demon lords in the world. He was the sworn ally of the storm dragon Veldora. Each new revelation left Myourmile with the same impression. His master was not simply a powerful being, he was a force of nature. And yet this same master entrusted him with the management of state affairs, the operation of hamburger, ramen, and teppanyaki franchises, and even the emerging project of an ice cream shop with the same calm trust given to someone whose reliability is never questioned. The revenues generated by Riega itself were far from insignificant, adding to a portfolio of activities that made Myourmile, the man who had started at the age of 7 selling vegetables just to survive, one of the richest and most influential humans in recorded history. The confidentiality surrounding all of this was absolute and perfectly controlled. Within the entire monster nation, only 2 individuals knew that Rimuru, Myourmile, and Elmesia were in fact the 3 heads of Riega, Benimaru, and Soe. The former had been informed directly by Rimuru, with a touch of irony, since one of the reasons given was to make sure that Shuna would not learn about certain activities of her lord, which essentially meant recruiting the older brother to keep an eye on the younger sister. Sue, on the other hand, had inevitably learned the secret through his own subordinates, whom Myourmile had borrowed for field operations. Only 2 people in an entire nation, and that was no coincidence. It said everything about the rigor and seriousness with which the 3 of them approached their discrete conquest of the world. To successfully handle the official and public side of this massive project, Myourmile needed human resources worthy of the task. Managing a trade alliance involving 4 nations, negotiating with sovereign rulers, overseeing economic flows on a continental scale, all of this required trustworthy and talented individuals in sufficient numbers. But such profiles are rare, especially when one refuses to entrust secret operations to unknown individuals. Myourmile shared this difficulty with Rimuru, who then introduced him to Testarossa, the White Primordial. With her breathtaking beauty and deceptively gentle smile, momentarily unsettled the seasoned merchant. He who had negotiated with kings and generals without losing his composure was reduced to the awkwardness of a beginner in front of a woman of such supernatural grace. Yet the moment Testarossa took charge, Myourmile realized, with a mix of admiration and fear, that the plan was advancing at a speed that felt anything but natural. His teams worked with a level of devotion that left no doubt about the influence Testarossa held over them. A single smile from her was enough to turn anyone into a zealous servant ready to move mountains. Meanwhile, Myourmile himself handled direct negotiations with various royal courts, which was no small task. But he could not help being impressed by the human machine Testarossa had set in motion. An unexpected friendship also formed between Myourmile and Cien, one of Testarossa's subordinates. It all began with a sincere remark from Myourmile, openly expressing his admiration for those who had the chance to work under someone as exceptional as Testarossa. Cien, usually cold and impeccably serious, took the comment as a high-level joke and burst into laughter, revealing a side of his personality that very few had ever seen. Since then, the 2 men would occasionally share a drink together, bonding over an unlikely camaraderie between the most powerful merchant in the West and the subordinate of the most feared demon in the world. It was only later that Myourmile learned the truth about Testarossa, and that revelation made him significantly reconsider his priorities. Learning that the woman of supernatural beauty he worked with daily was in reality a primordial demon of terrifying power, capable of annihilating an entire city to avenge a friend without even raising her voice, radically changed his attitude. The boldest merchant in the West, the one who had negotiated with kings and crime lords without flinching, decided that from that day forward, every word he spoke, every action he took, and especially anything that could even remotely be perceived as inappropriate, would have to undergo extremely strict self-review beforehand. He solemnly vowed to keep himself in check with unwavering discipline. Barroom jokes have their limits, and that limit was named Testarossa. That being said, this anecdote raises a fascinating question about Rimuru's very nature. Rimuru Tempest, a slime who dreams above all of a peaceful and harmonious world, nevertheless carries within himself a power capable of reshaping reality itself. Chaos Creator, a force that defies the established order of the world. In the final volume, Volume 23, he is now designated by a new prestigious title, and the work finally approaches the ultimate mystery of his true identity. From the very first moments, Rimuru intrigues the most ancient beings through his completely unexpected actions. Indeed, exchanging names with the species of the true dragons, a practice reserved for entities of colossal power, and possessing skills capable of directly interfering with the very system of the world itself, all of this places him resolutely apart. Rimuru never stops repeating it. He is not an evil slime. He does everything he can to remain a harmless, peaceful, almost naive being. Yet behind this facade lies the story of a man, Satoru Mikami, who sacrificed his life to protect a younger colleague. Transferred into a parallel world in the form of a slime, his dearest wish remains to live simply, joyfully, in peace. This deep desire guides each and every one of his decisions. Before his death, Satoru Mikami had formulated a rather particular regret, that of never having been able to fully enjoy the company of women in his previous life. It is this precise regret which, during his reincarnation, gave birth to the unique skill Predator. This ability, initially relatively simple, never stopped evolving until it became a terrifying force, capable of completely absorbing an opponent, annihilating attacks capable of destroying entire worlds, and adapting to any threat. And speaking of his famous regret, do you know what type of woman Rimuru truly prefers? Or, more precisely, which race truly attracts him? A small hint, very clear elements were already given as early as the first season. Nothing is left to chance. So let's see. Give your answer in the comments. We're going to have a good laugh. And above all, we'll see who was really paying attention. To your keyboards. Thus, shortly after his reincarnation, Rimuru appears in the Sealed Cave, a place deeply marked by the presence of the storm dragon Veldora. The continuous leakage of his immense quantity of magicules has transformed the environment. Hippocute grass grows in abundance, offering near infinite regeneration, and high-quality magic stones literally cover the ground. This excess of magicules has strengthened all the monsters present, except that Rimuru, from the moment of his arrival, instantly adapts to this extreme environment and begins accumulating abilities at an abnormal speed. What makes the situation even stranger is that Satoru Mikami had already acquired several skills even before his reincarnation was fully completed. The manifestation of Great Sage within him seems almost predestined, as if a karmic bond had chosen it to accompany him. The regret expressed on his deathbed, that of having remained a virgin his entire life, first gave rise to the extra skill Sage, which then evolved into the unique skill Great Sage. This skill would become one of Rimuru's major pillars, even rivaling Predator. Great Sage possesses several powerful sub-skills: analytical appraisal, parallel calculation, chant annulment, thought acceleration, allowing the perception of the surrounding world 1,000 times faster, all of creation. Analysis allows the acquisition of detailed information on everything absorbed into the stomach. Parallel calculation separately processes data without disturbing the main line of thought. But the true strength of Great Sage is not only technical, it is its ability to engage in dialogue, to instantly answer Rimuru's questions with mechanical precision while giving the illusion of an independent personality. At first, it merely borrows part of the functions of the voice of the world and modifies itself in order to simulate consciousness. Yet, in only a few days, it stabilizes its abilities and far surpasses this simple borrowing. This speed of evolution is, in itself, highly suspicious. For Rimuru, cast naked and unarmed into an unknown and dangerous world, Great Sage represents an irreplaceable support. Thanks to all of creation function, which accesses all non-hidden laws of the world, it can answer almost any question. After absorbing Storm Dragon Veldora into the stomach, it blocks all interference from the dragon while borrowing his magicules at will. Control so absolute that Veldora temporarily comes to doubt Rimuru's benevolence. Later, when he understands that this is a separate entity, he is left deeply shocked. Great Sage also provides automatic battle mode. It then takes total control of Rimuru's body and fights with terrifying efficiency. During its early activation, it overwhelms monsters such as the Orc Lord, against whom Rimuru was struggling, to the point that even Hakuro, who was observing the scene, is left astonished. This mode will be used multiple times thereafter, and with each evolution of Great Sage, combat strategies become increasingly sophisticated and relentless. The event that, from the very first moments of his new life, definitively seals Rimuru's exceptional nature is without a doubt his encounter with Storm Dragon Veldora. The species of the true dragons possesses such an overwhelming concentration of magicules that very few beings are capable of simply standing in their presence without trembling or collapsing. Yet a newly born slime dares to approach Storm Dragon Veldora, who was then imprisoned within his eternal seal. Not only does he engage him in conversation, but he also displays extraordinary intelligence and a power that already seems to verge on A rank. Highly intrigued, Veldora's curiosity is further awakened when this slime reveals himself to be a reincarnated being, an existence exceedingly rare in this world. On an unexpected proposal from Rimuru, the two seal their budding friendship through an exchange of names, an act symbolic and reserved for absolute equals, engraved directly into the soul. Rimuru offers Veldora the family name Tempest, while Veldora names the slime Rimuru. Thus, from his very first steps, Rimuru is granted an incomprehensible status, a slime considered the equal of a true dragon. But what makes the situation even more aberrant is that it is the slime who, first, gives a name to the dragon. Normally, the act of naming consists of the stronger being bestowing part of its power upon the weaker. Yet here, it is Rimuru who first imposes a shared name upon Veldora. At that moment, the two truly exchange their power reciprocally, in an atmosphere of complete trust, something practically impossible without a deep and immediate bond. Rimuru will only later understand the true significance of the act of naming, when he himself names the goblins and then the Tempest Wolves. Everything suggests that even during this historic exchange with Veldora, Great Sage discreetly played a crucial role in making the operation possible. After defeating the Orc Lord, Rimuru obtains the Demon Lord seed necessary to access the rank of Awakened Demon Lord. Because of Clayman's schemes, which cause heavy losses among the inhabitants of his young nation, Rimuru makes the irrevocable decision to carry out the Harvest Festival ritual. By sacrificing 10,000 human souls, he completes his awakening as a true Demon Lord, defeats Clayman, and forces the other Demon Lords to acknowledge his legitimacy within the Council of the Ten Great, which has become the Octagram. At first, the Jura-Tempest Federation, a nation of monsters, is scorned and attacked by humans. But from the moment Rimuru fully becomes aware of his resolve, his position in the world changes radically. News of the advent of a new Demon Lord spreads like wildfire, accompanied by a persistent rumor. The legendary storm dragon Veldora is also said to reside in this country. Some mockingly claim that it is nothing more than a drawing of a dragon, but others, more sensitive to the flow of magicules, firmly believe it. From that moment on, the world's perception of Rimuru shifts definitively. Why does Rimuru attract so many powerful beings? Why do demons, in particular, seem irresistibly drawn to him? The answer likely lies in the very nature of his soul. From their very first meeting, Veldora had perceived within Rimuru a soul of exceptional solidity, almost abnormal for a mere reincarnated being. When the original Noir, the primordial Diablo, is summoned, he immediately senses a strangely familiar presence and swears absolute loyalty to Rimuru. Yet Noir has often manifested in the material world in the past. Therefore, it is not his mere appearance that awakens this nostalgia. Everything indicates that it is Rimuru's soul itself that provokes this sensation. Demons, it is said, perceive the color of souls, and Rimuru's shines with a light of a higher dimension, pure and powerful enough for a primordial like Noir to instantly recognize him as his rightful master. Diablo is not the only one to feel this strange familiarity. The fallen angel Dino, one of the 7 primordial angels created by Veldonava himself, and who served the creator god directly, also perceives within Rimuru a soul's glow that he immediately recognizes, different from that of Veldonava, yet carrying undeniable nostalgia. This is why Dino spends his time idling peacefully within the Federation, as if he had found a place where he finally feels at home. This sensation strongly suggests that the origin of Rimuru's soul is connected to the very roots of the creation of the world. In Volume 23, the most recent one, Ramirez herself observes Rimuru and the resurrected Veldanava, now devoid of all emotion and all will. She perceives within Rimuru something that the creator god has lost, a familiar presence that leaves her deeply perplexed. Finally, in the famous Slime Observation Journal by Veldora, written while the dragon resided within Rimuru's stomach, an entry appears titled, "That Nostalgic Scent." The episode takes place just after the meeting between Rimuru and the dwarf king Gazel Dwargo. Thanks to Great Sage, which uses part of the functions of the voice of the world, Rimuru manages to communicate directly with Veldora within his isolated space. At the moment when Rimuru is about to name 500 new monsters, Great Sage precisely calculates the maximum amount of magicules that Rimuru can safely expend and, on its own initiative, automatically supplies the required energy from Veldora's reserves. Veldora, observing all of this from inside the stomach, is utterly astonished by the very idea that a being could borrow the functions of the voice of the world in order to clearly transmit its will to the outside. This unexpected creativity leaves him speechless. Meanwhile, outside, during the same period, Rimuru crosses paths with Shizu, who is then traveling with a group of adventurers. Veldora, sensing her power from a distance, unhesitatingly compares her to King Gazel Dwargo himself, a strength that fills him with excitement at the incredible diversity of humans. Yet the mystery of this nostalgic scent mentioned in his journal remains entirely unresolved, with no clear explanation at this stage. In the world of Tensura, the word scent or fragrance is often used to describe what particularly attracts Rimuru: appetizing dishes or the presence of elegant and charismatic women, such as Testarossa or Velgrind. Here, no meal is involved, and the only female figure present is Shizu. However, for Veldora, nothing about her should evoke even the slightest nostalgia. No connection, no shared memory. Taking into account the revelations of Volume 23, one might imagine a link between Rimuru and Shizu, but this remains forced and unconvincing. Veldora, having undergone countless regenerations, has lost a large part of his most ancient memories. It is possible that, unconsciously, he superimposes Rimuru's completely unpredictable behavior onto that of Veldanava himself, sensing a familiarity at the level of the soul. Another hypothesis: through the interventions of Great Sage, he may have perceived, without understanding it, the Lucia factor. After all, Lucia was in a relationship with Veldanava, with whom she maintained a deep bond, which represents a plausible connection. This sensation is by no means impossible. During the war against the Eastern Empire, Michael and his subordinates managed to break the soul corridor linking Rimuru and Veldora, placing the dragon under their total control. Driven mad with rage, Rimuru decides to confront alone the two manipulated true dragons, Veldora and Velgrind. He then names his ultimate skill Raphael, Ciel, triggering its evolution into a Manus. Endowed with its own consciousness, Ciel sees its computational abilities reach unprecedented heights. It completely neutralizes Velgrind's assaults, granting Rimuru all the time he needs to focus on Veldora. At the heart of the battle, Rimuru absorbs Veldora's core, instantly restoring the soul corridor. Thanks to the in-depth analysis carried out by Ciel, he understands that by using Veldora's ultimate skill, he can resurrect him completely. The operation succeeds. Rimuru integrates the dragon factor himself and evolves, transitioning from the status of a demonic slime to that of an ultimate slime, the highest form of the holy demonic spirit. From that moment on, his magicule reserves rival those of Veldora, or even surpass them, a phenomenon that defies all known laws of the world. Velgrind herself, stunned, comments on this event. A soul that descended by chance alongside a true dragon, endowed with exactly the qualities necessary to receive the dragon factor? A pure coincidence? She quickly abandons the idea of thinking further about it, as the situation exceeds all comprehension. The true source of Rimuru's power lies in his intellectual abilities and in the constant evolution of his ultimate skills. First Great Sage, then Raphael upon his awakening as a true demon lord, this entity has long since transcended the simple status of a skill. It acts as the perfect reflection of Rimuru's will, or perhaps as an even more mysterious existence, whose exact nature remains shrouded. Thanks to Raphael, and later Ciel, Rimuru accumulates an unbelievable number of ultimate skills and even manages to evolve them, a feat that no one else can achieve. During the confrontation with Velgrind, he absorbs her power and crosses a new threshold, becoming de facto a subspecies of a true dragon. He is no longer simply a demon lord, he belongs to an entirely different dimension. These impossible phenomena multiply as the story progresses, astonishing both allies and enemies alike each time. Even the true dragons themselves are not spared. From Volume 23 onward, the reactions of the true dragons to Rimuru's absolute abnormality become particularly striking. Velzard, the ice dragon, openly nicknames him Suspicious Slime. This is not pure hatred, however. She is simply jealous of the attention Guy gives to Rimuru, like a possessive child toward a newcomer. Yet even she spends the entire final volume being constantly shaken. Just as with Velgrind, Rimuru, through Ciel, fuses two ultimate skills, Gabriel and Leviathan, and evolves them into a new, terrifying skill, Cthulhu. Skills were originally a system entirely designed by Veldanava, the creator god who built the very foundations of this world. Among them, angelic series ultimate skills such as Gabriel belong to the exceedingly rare category of the seven virtues, powers that are truly one of a kind. To witness Rimuru, through Ciel, fuse and evolve Gabriel and Leviathan into a new ultimate skill, Cthulhu, whose performance vastly surpasses the originals. This goes beyond all comprehension. Velzard, the eternal ice dragon, has no choice but to be literally stunned by this feat. At that precise moment, she understands with absolute certainty that she would have no chance against Rimuru in a one-on-one battle. For her, the gap is no longer even quantifiable, an overwhelming, insurmountable disparity. Rimuru's magical reserves now far exceed those of a true dragon like herself. But what exactly is Rimuru? A legitimate, almost inevitable question. If such a being had been an enemy, despair would have been total. But Rimuru is an ally. Velzard, who secretly knew of Veldanava's return and of the threat of total destruction looming over the world, had been living in deep, almost resigned anguish. Rimuru represents for her an unexpected ray of hope, a chance at salvation. All the suspicion and jealousy she harbored toward him, particularly that possessiveness regarding Guy, completely evaporate. She becomes a loyal and determined ally. That said, she has no intention of letting Rimuru's reckless behavior slide. On the contrary, she teams up with Guy to relentlessly keep track of his ever more extravagant exploits, with curiosity mixed with suspicion. Velgrind, the Scorching Dragon, had already been confronted with the abyssal difference in level during the war against the Eastern Empire. Her stance, for her part, has never changed. As long as Rudra, or rather his current vessel, Masayuki, is by her side, she is ready to challenge the entire world. In Volume 23, even after the shocking revelation that Veldanava is indeed alive, she remains true to herself. She calmly entrusts her will to Masayuki and chooses to oppose the creator god alongside Rimuru. After all, Masayuki and Rimuru share a friendly and respectful relationship, and Rimuru is personally the one who allowed Velgrind to reunite with the man she loves. She often teases him by calling him an idiot or a fool, but these jabs are in fact the mark of deep trust and playful affection. And in any case, if things were ever to turn bad, she could always cancel the True Dragon release. Even in the improbable scenario where Masayuki and Rimuru were to become enemies, Velgrind could never betray Rimuru. The bond is far too strong. Veldora, for his part, is probably the one who, aside from Ciel, has observed Rimuru's unbelievable exploits the closest and for the longest time. His trust in his slime friend is therefore absolute, and the final volume only reinforces it, perhaps in an even more irrational way than before. During the confrontation against Veldanava, the latter uses his skill Compaction, an attack that purely and simply rips out the target's soul. Rimuru, struck head-on, temporarily collapses. Around him, Guy, Milim, Chloe, and all the others present panic. Only Veldora remains perfectly calm, true to his temperament. Of course, the soul corridor that binds them and their mutual backups play a major role. But even afterward, when Rimuru continues the fight without a soul, an absolutely aberrant situation, Veldora declares without the slightest hesitation that victory is already assured. Better still, he asserts that only a Rimuru capable of fighting without a soul can defeat Veldanava, a being of whom one can no longer even be sure whether he is the real Rimuru, a completely unknown and terrifying existence. And yet Veldora grants him blind, unshakable trust. Only a friendship forged over years of close observation can explain such certainty. Veldanava, shattered by the loss of Lucia, has lost all reason. Fully aware of all the events of the world, he designates Rimuru as a singularity and considers him an enemy to be eliminated. At this stage, it is necessary to emphasize just how cheat-level powerful Veldanava is, a level that more than justifies the fact that even Guy was once instantly defeated. As the creator god, he possesses an absolutely terrifying array of abilities. His primary Genesis-class weapon is a sword he personally forged upon his resurrection. It possesses the ability to truly resurrect the dead by invoking their original soul from the past, intervening directly on the timeline, a true perfect soul invocation far beyond the mere memorial recreation of Masayuki's ultimate skill King of Heroes banner. We have already mentioned compaction, a technique that extracts the target's soul with absolutely no possibility of resistance. For everyone except Rimuru, even true dragons, it is instant game over, and even Velgrin's parallel existences would make no difference. Finally, Veldanava is capable of freely using magic even within a space where time is stopped. Among Veldanava's countless abilities are primitive magic, a primordial form of magic that transcends all modern laws, and initialization heaven, a technique which, although it ultimately failed, aimed at nothing less than annihilating the current world in order to rebuild a new one from scratch. Faced with such power, one cannot help but wonder, who could possibly prevail against the creator god himself? Yet Rimuru, deprived of his soul by the terrible compaction, continues to fight and displays strength at least equal to, if not superior to, Veldanava's. This performance leaves even Veldanava, ordinarily impassive, deeply shocked. For within the system he himself designed, a being devoid of a soul should simply be incapable of acting. At that instant, Rimuru represents to him the ultimate obstacle, a living bug, an anomaly that defies the very foundations of reality. The final revelation of Volume 23 is clear. Rimuru's identity is intimately linked to Veldanava and Lucia. At the precise moment when Veldanava, finally reunited with Lucia, is on the verge of being absorbed by Ivaraj, a crucial flashback emerges. It takes us back to a time prior to Milim's birth. The couple, still united and full of hope, discusses the name of their future child. A girl would be called Milim, and for a boy, the name is not explicitly spoken. But the words of the dying Lucia, who designates Rimuru as Elpis, hope, and Veldanava's statement that his dearest prayer has been granted, leave little room for doubt. It is indeed Rimuru. Thus, Rimuru could be the child that Veldanava and Lucia were expecting, their son. However, it is more prudent to consider him as an existence deeply connected to the couple, rather than a child in the literal sense. If that were the case, Milim and Rimuru would be brother and sister, or half-brother and half-sister. Let us push the hypothesis further, even if it remains speculative. One possibility is that Lucia conceived a second child without anyone knowing. Pregnancy, the birth of Milim, then the tragedy that took the couple away. Or Milim and Rimuru could have been twins. A colder but more realistic explanation invokes the vanishing twin phenomenon. During a twin pregnancy, one fetus disappears and is absorbed by the mother. The soul of that unborn child would then have migrated, reincarnating first as Satoru Mikami in the material world before becoming the slime we know. Of course, these theories lack concrete proof. The actions and statements of Ciel in the following chapters open up far more solid and relevant avenues. That said, if Rimuru is truly Veldanava's son, many things are explained. Milim's immediate fascination, she who, after losing her father, had placed her trust in no one, this explosive friendship with Rimuru, or even the perfect chemistry with Veldora from their very first meeting. The reincarnation system designed by Veldanava, named the Cycle of Reincarnation, aims to allow souls to progress toward a better world, to be refined over successive lives, and to transmit their legacy to future generations. Those who reach supreme enlightenment finally gain access to the promised land. This refinement corresponds, in the Tensura universe, to the acquisition of skills, political evolution, or awakening as a true hero. As for enlightenment, it evokes Buddhist nirvana, liberation from the cycle of rebirth, an existence freed from the limits of mortality. Such a system, which places everything on human potential and diversity, perfectly reflects Veldanova's original personality, a god who deeply loved humanity and its infinite possibilities. But even a god can be mistaken. Before arriving at this balanced system, Veldanova experienced several crushing failures. 1. A world without desire. Superhumans, deprived of all motivation, fell into boredom and met a tragic end. 2. A world without death. Immortality gave rise to stagnation and despair. 3. A world with predators to maintain tension. Better, but the constant fear of death generated suffering and chaos. These errors show that at this stage, Veldanova had already renounced absolute omniscience and omnipotence. For example, the primordials, the original demons, were born unintentionally when Veldanova created the 7 primordial angels from the great spirits of light. Likewise, by creating the angelic series' ultimate skills, the virtues, he triggered the parallel appearance of the demonic series' ultimate skills, the sins, as an uncontrollable chain reaction. Even when faced with a Rimuru who, deprived of his soul by the terrible compaction, continues to oppose him fiercely, Veldanova comes to formulate an erroneous hypothesis. What if it were a Manus? This misconception clearly reveals that the creator god, having abandoned absolute omniscience and omnipotence, is no longer capable of understanding everything, even as the founder of the world. He is not infallible. In reality, Veldanova was attempting to gather the fragments of Lucia's soul, her factors, through the reincarnation system he himself had designed. Yet he does not succeed completely. Worse still, he is entirely unaware that Ciel, on her side, was discreetly recovering those same factors in an attempt to achieve a complete reconstruction of Lucia. Why does Veldanova fail to collect them? The answer seems to lie in the nature of the bearers of these fragments. With the exception of Rimuru, Lucia's factors had incarnated within humans endowed with exceptional spiritual strength: Shizu Izawa, Hinata Sakaguchi, Chloe Aubert, and several others. All of them, or nearly all, reach the status of saint, champion, or true hero. Now, as we have seen with the reincarnation system, those who rise to the rank of saint or hero transcend the limits of human mortality. They escape the cycle of reincarnation established by Veldanova. The direct consequence is that these souls become undetectable to him. Ironically, the creator god finds himself trapped by his own system, a limitation he had not anticipated after renouncing absolute omnipotence. This desperate quest for scattered factors irresistibly recalls Velgrin's behavior in Volume 17. The Dragoness, perceiving that Rudra's true soul resided in Masayuki and not in the successive empty shells, focused solely on the genuine bearer. It is said that the radiance of a soul reaches its peak at the moment of death. Thus, Velgrin systematically detected and rescued reincarnations carrying even a fragment of Rudra's soul, even across other worlds. Let us apply this pattern to Rimuru. The entity playing the role of Velgrin would then be Great Sage, evolving into Raphael and later Ciel. At the moment when Satoru Mikami, on the brink of death, sees his soul shine intensely, perhaps amplified by the regret of his virginity, it is detected. This exceptional compatibility allows the skill to anchor itself deeply, to the point of interfering with the voice of the world itself and binding its fate to that of Rimuru. Under this hypothesis, Rimuru would be the true bearer of the original soul, while the resurrected Veldanova would be nothing more than an empty shell, exactly as Rudra and Masayuki are two distinct personalities. This creates no contradiction. The gradual loss of Rudra's personality due to the erosion of his soul explains just as well Veldanova's downfall after Lucia's disappearance. In the same way that Rudra could be temporarily resurrected once the factors were almost entirely gathered, Ciel manages to bring Lucia back for a brief moment. As for Ciel's strange enthusiasm, declaring that there is no other choice but to eliminate Veldanova without restoring his full personality, it is perfectly explained. The authentic and complete soul already resides within her master, Rimuru. According to Luminous's revelations regarding the resurrections of the true dragons, these are always imperfect, memories erased, personality reset, a flaw already observable in Veldora after his many regenerations. Applied to Veldanova, this makes it credible that his own resurrection was marred by a major defect. Finally, regarding the origin of Great Sage, The example of Myourmiles offers a solid lead, her unique skill. Greed drawn to hosts driven by deep desire was passed on to Yuki. When a skill possesses a strong affinity with an informational entity, the two can merge. This is how Myourmiles established herself as Yuki's Manas, thus giving birth to Manas Maria. Digital nature-type skills sometimes display such compatibility that they fuse with their host. Satoru Mikami, endowed with exceptional talent for wisdom, provided ideal ground for great sage. The deeply embedded Lucia factor only served to amplify this fusion. Moreover, the familiarity with which Ciel addresses Lucia, like an old acquaintance, and the fact that Raphael bears a name so close to the ultimate skill Lucia possessed in life, further reinforce the idea of a deep, almost intimate bond between Ciel and Lucia's soul. Thinking about it carefully, it is still strange that Ciel, who would be capable of recreating an entire universe if she so desired, failed to gather that final 1% of Lucia's factors. What if, in reality, this missing fragment resided within herself? What if Ciel, consciously or unconsciously, simply refused to part with it? This hypothesis would explain so many mysteries. Why Satoru Mikami had already acquired skills even before his death was fully complete. Why Veldanava was never able to bring Lucia back to life in a perfect manner, or even why the creator god's heart seemed so empty, so broken. Rimuru and Ciel would then each carry within themselves essential parts of the original personalities of Veldanava and Lucia, indispensable fragments that explain their absolute complementarity. Moreover, this would make the reaction of the dying Lucia coherent. Although in theory she was meeting Rimuru for the first time, she immediately designates him as Hope and seems to recognize him as the child she and Veldanava had once awaited. A deep, almost instinctive connection. Although the work never states it explicitly, everything suggests that Rimuru is an existence born from a bug during the reincarnation of Veldanava himself. His soul, highly compatible with Lucia's factors, was reinforced by the act of naming of his skill, an act that definitively removed him from the cycle of reincarnation. Rimuru thus became a total anomaly, a being who escapes the very rules established by the creator god. Yet neither he nor those around him seem particularly concerned by this. To everyone, Rimuru remains simply that peaceful, slightly capricious slime who dreams only of tranquility and freedom. A slime who does what he wants, when he wants, without overthinking these existential questions. What do you think? We have just dived deep into the revelations of the final volume to explore Rimuru's secret identity. We have reviewed countless theories and clues, but the fact remains that the work never provides a definitive, official answer. The strangeness of Great Sage from the very first moments, the accumulation of anomalies, everything suggests that Rimuru is tied to a major malfunction in the system designed by Veldanava, perhaps even to an irregularity in the reincarnation of Lucia and the creator god himself. This channel will continue to explore the universe of Tensei Shitara Slime Ken to dissect its mysteries and share analyses to enrich your reading experience. If you haven't already, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. We'll meet again very soon for new adventures in this incredible world. See you next time.